This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Lessons Learned. And this episode is about women's health issues, although I'm not sure it's only geared to women. So I want those of you listening to absorb as much as you can. If you have questions, please contact us here at newclevelandradio@gmail.com, and I will put you in touch with our guest, who happens to be Aimee Neiman. And Aimee saw that I was looking for individuals to be on this podcast to talk about women's issues, health issues. And she sent me a bio. And when I first read it, Aimee, I like skimmed through it and I thought, wow, I don't even know where to begin. But earlier today, I decided to not skim through it, read it line by line. And then I went out online doing some of my own research. And one of the things I know that you're going to share with our listeners is that doctors are not always the wise people we think they are, and not through any fault of theirs, uh, because you can't train a doctor on every illness, every symptom. And a lot of times, women get pushed off to the side. And so I know some of your symptoms that you talked about, you were very fatigued. Um, things ached. And when you went to the doctor, basically you were told you needed more sunlight.
Right. I was told you need more sunlight, you need a better sleep schedule. You need to go, to a pain clinic. A lot of them didn't want to look for the actual problem.
So when did you first notice that there was something really wrong that needed attention?
It was back in 2016 is when my symptoms really got to a point that I knew something wasn't normal. I had just moved in with my boyfriend and I thought, my back is killing me. I'm really hurting. And I thought, well, I just moved. I lifted stuff. So it's because of that. But the timing, that was just the timing, but that wasn't the reason. So finally, after a month, I just break down crying. I say I'm in pain all the time. This isn't right. And I was waking up every morning with my hands and my feet throbbing. That's how I would wake up. I would wake up to it, not an alarm.
Wow. So it came on fairly quickly,
Hmm.
although the timing, like you said, it made you think, well, maybe it was the move. But
Right.
after a little bit of time when those aches and pains should have gone away,
Right.
they were still there.
Exactly.
So who did you tell about this first? Was it your boyfriend? Was it your family? Or did you just go directly to a doctor?
Well, I lived with my boyfriend, so I told him first, and then I'm also really close with my mom, so I called her too, and both of them were very supportive. They both urged me to see a doctor. So the first thing I did was go to my primary care doctor, and she did run some tests, but I did end up getting referred to a rheumatologist, and that's sort of where the real issues began.
So, one of the things that you talked about in your bio, and this is going on a lot, and especially now during COVID, um, you're referred to a specialist. Um, and a lot of times we don't have a choice because there may not be that many in the area that you're living in. And then you go to make that appointment. And even though, you are in acute pain and you need it now, you're getting appointment weeks, months,
Right.
even further out. Um, so, how soon did you get in to see somebody?
The first appointment with a rheumatologist took me, I want to say, 2.5 months, and that was already after I had some abnormal test results from my primary care doctor. That was the quickest I could get in. I didn't get to pick the doctor. It was just through Cleveland Clinic. They said the first available appointment with a rheumatologist, and that's when it was.
So, to me, that is telling me there is something wrong with our medical system the way it is. Um,
Absolutely.
and I know I've been in that situation myself where I was told, well, 4 year I had a neurologist, but he retired, and his office said to me they were going to make me an appointment with somebody who was taking over his caseload. And it took a year and a half for me to get in.
Wow.
And, I did the same thing you did. I complained to the hospital saying, look at, if there's something wrong with me and I'm supposed to see somebody, why are you letting me suffer for a year and a half?
Right.
And the same thing, you suffered for an extra 2 months. So when you went in to see the rheumatologist, now I'm sure you're probably um, hurting, you're upset. You did mention in your bio, that you too have suffered from depression. And I think everybody, to some degree, suffers from depression.
Mhm.
And pain can actually make it worse. So when you went in, um, was there any kind of camaraderie where you felt, okay, I'm finally in the right place?
Well, when I walked in, I'm hopeful because I think this is where I'm supposed to be. This is the kind of doctor that's going to help me. But that immediately changed when that doctor walked in. It's like she looked at my chart and she had her mind made up. The depression that I suffer from, when I was a teenager, I suffered a traumatic event. So my depression was caused by a situation, and it had been handled. Again, depression is something that stays with you. It's, you can treat it, you can be on medication, you can see a therapist, but it's something that you treat, you don't cure. So even though it's still there, it's not, it was very well managed, and the doctor looks at my chart, looks at me, and says, she doesn't even do a physical examination. She looks at me and says, "You are a young white female. You need a better sleep schedule and more sunlight. I have fibromyalgia." And that was it. So of course I just start crying because I was just so disappointed and let down because I thought this would be finally something that helps me. And only after I'm in tears does she say, "Well, I'll just run some blood tests just to ease your mind." And
Just to ease your mind.
just to ease my mind. And sure enough, those blood tests also come back abnormal. And that's when the a couple days later, I get a call from one of their nurses that says, "You need to make an appointment right away because you have lupus." So that was hard to hear because lupus is it can be manageable for some people, but it's not an easy disease from what I've heard. So I make an appointment with the nurse practitioner for the following day. I did bring my mom to that to have some extra support. So at that appointment, the nurse practitioner says, "Why are you here? You just saw the doctor a couple days ago." I said, "Well, because I got a phone call from a nurse about my blood test and said I have lupus." And the lady looks at me like I have three heads and is like, "You don't have lupus. I don't know who would tell you that. You must have misunderstood." And is just, putting this blame on me. And she tells me, goes right back to the mental health aspect, looks at my chart. She says, "Are you on any antidepressants?" I say, "I don't see why that's relevant. I was, but had nothing to do with why I was there." Then she says, "Are you currently in counseling?" And that really made me mad too. So the same thing. I said, "No, I'm not. I don't need to be right now. I don't understand what that has to do with the reason I'm here today." And I didn't really get a response to that. And she just said, "You have fibromyalgia. That's it. You just need to go to a pain clinic. Just go to a pain clinic." And that was it. So I get, it was outrageous. I actually did file a complaint with the Cleveland Clinic ombudsman, which is like a patient advocate
Right.
thing. And that, I wrote a very long, detailed letter explaining this stuff. And I forgot to include this in my in my email to you, but they actually called me back about a week later saying that it did not conclude any wrongdoings because, again, at the end of the day, even if they're a patient advocate, hospitals are not just there for patients, they're businesses.
Right.
It's all
Exactly.
about money. So the person paying that person, they're protecting themselves. And I I do businesses. I have a history of working in businesses and sales. I'm a realtor now. I understand I understand businesses and you have to do what you have to do, but at that point, I would think it just crosses an ethical boundary.
Absolutely. And going back to her description of you, that you are a young white female, she was social profiling you. Basically,
She
what
was.
she's saying is, "Hey, you've got it all, so don't worry about this. This is
Right.
a big deal." And the reality of it is, I don't care if you're white, tan, black, pink, makes no difference, okay?
Right.
If you have an ailment and the blood work shows that, or whatever the test is,
It was blood work.
right, we need the medical community to at least look at it and say, at least acknowledge, yes, there's
Absolutely.
something wrong. Maybe we don't understand it. Maybe we've never seen this before. Okay.
Mhm.
But let us try to get you some help. Maybe
Right.
pain management initially may have helped you learn to live with the pain. And I've been through pain management and I know what pain management's all about. It's about learning how to control it so you can do what you need to do.
Right. And in some aspects, that's great. But at the end of the day, it's really masking the issue. If there's an underlying issue and you manage your pain, yeah, that's great. But if there's still something going on, that's not going to take that away.
So, what did it take for you to finally get a diagnosis?
Oh boy. Well, I had a similar experience. I went to a different rheumatologist after that that was referred to by my primary care doctor. Now, this guy I had to wait like 6 months to get into because it was a private practice. I initially thought that he was a very thorough doctor, and I was impressed. He had told me, "Hey, I think you have ankylosing spondylitis," and explained to me that's an autoimmune disease. It's sort of like an arthritis of your back where your vertebrae start to fuse together. And there is different symptoms for that besides that. And I thought it really lined up. So I was really hopeful. I have my MRI done, and a couple days later one of his nurses calls me and says, "Oh, your MRI was normal." So that was really discouraging for me to hear because it seemed like that was it. I had ended up going to a follow-up appointment with him to discuss it, and he told me the same thing. Yeah, your MRI was normal. Must be fibromyalgia, and he seemed really empathetic. But at that point, it's sort of like he already had his mind made. And finally, I decide I have to see one more doctor, and I was really close to not even doing that because I was just so discouraged already. But I had actually found this doctor online and on a forum for people with chronic illnesses, unexplained illnesses, and people actually had written in their locations and what doctors are good near there. And during this time period, I had come across a condition called Ehlers Danlos Syndrome, which I was later diagnosed with. But when I read about that, I'm like, whoa, this is it. This is what I have. So off of that list, I made an appointment with one of the rheumatologists locally that was recommended on this forum. So it took about 2 or 3 months to get into her, but when I was finally there, I was very nervous because I was sort of at this point expecting it to go like the other two went.
Right.
But I it was totally different. It was exactly how it should have been. First, she did a very, very thorough exam. She even looked at my nail beds and pointed out, "Hey, you have pitting in your nails," which means if you look down at your fingernails and there's things that almost look like little, like almost like little dents, like little from pins,
Right.
that's called nail pitting, and that's a sign of autoimmune disease. I None of my other doctors even would even think about looking at my nails. So that just shows how thorough she is.
Yep.
So she asks me, because she was with Cleveland Clinic too, what sort of tests I'd had done. So I told her that about my blood work and that I had that MRI. And because the MRI was done at a Cleveland Clinic hospital, she was able to access it. So she pulls it up. And I had already told her from the beginning, the other two rheumatologists did not find anything. And I was straight up with her and said, I think this is more than fibromyalgia. And I explained to her that I didn't feel like I was being taken seriously. And when she looked at this MRI, she says, "Aimee, This MRI says you have cortical erosions down your spine, erosions in your spine. She said it shows that there's a history of chronic inflammation. She told me this spine right here, if I were to look at this and not have the chart, I would think this was someone in their 60s or 70s. So not a normal MRI. And she said that I had ankylosing spondylitis, which is what the last doctor suspected. So I don't know if that wasn't if that was an error on his part for taking the word of someone who didn't know what they were doing or just not double checking. I don't know how he missed it because that's what he thought, but he did. And I was diagnosed with that, and I was also diagnosed with Ehlers Danlos Syndrome that same day. And she had noticed when she did her physical exam, she noticed the hypermobility of my joints. She noticed the tightness in my muscles. She was very thorough and had said to me that I fit the criteria for Ehlers Danlos syndrome. Now there's like 13 different subtypes of it, but the type that I have is diagnosed clinically. There's not a test for it, so it's just based on your symptoms. You have to match. I believe it's like at least 7 out of 9 or something, and I matched everyone. So I was diagnosed with it, and having that validation that this is not, and there's nothing wrong, if someone has fibromyalgia, I'm sure that's a horrible thing to suffer with. It just in my case, I knew that's not what it was, and it was really
Sure.
good to be validated and to hear, so I can get the treatment I needed. So since then, that doctor, she also told me I needed to start biologic injections for TNF blockers. And so if you ever see on TV commercials for, Humira,
Right.
Enbrel, all those shots,
Yep.
I do right now I do Enbrel. I did Humira at first, but I was allergic. Um, I do my Enbrel shot once a week. My rheumatologist, still see the same one. She told me initially I was sort of not thrilled about having to inject myself. So I asked if there's an alternative. She said, not right now. This is going to help improve your symptoms, but it's also preventative. She said to me that my spine was already in the condition that if I do not start taking that medicine by the time I'm 40, I could be crippled.
Wow.
I was 22, or no, I'm sorry, I was 23 when I had that appointment. I'm 25 now. So it's in the long run, not even that far off.
Sure. Absolutely.
And it just makes you think what would have happened if a year earlier that MRI that was taken would have been read right, or even before that, if that initial doctor, that initial rheumatologist would have actually done testing for herself and
Exactly.
ordered an MRI then.
So, with the medication that you're taking, um, is that making your joints stronger? Is that what that's for?
It's not really to make them stronger. It decreases inflammation.
Okay.
Uh, TNF blockers, they have they ward off your autoimmune response. So when you have an autoimmune disease, you have overactive immune system. So what would happen is, the antibodies in your body, they attack themselves. And so that is what caused the inflammation and arthritis and everything behind that. And this medicine just sort of slows down that immune response. So it's actually it's an immunosuppressant is
Okay.
really just a blanket term for it.
So, ha- have you been able? You said you're a realtor now, so obviously you're doing um, daily life, and hopefully to the degree that you would like to do it. Um, but does it still stop you in your tracks occasionally?
Absolutely. I actually have been a realtor for about a year. When I was diagnosed with this, I was a manager in retail. It would my When I was finally diagnosed, my rheumatologist said, "Amy, you have to get out of retail. This is going to speed up the progression." So that was hard for me to make a career change, but I have a lot of family in real estate and there's a lot of flexibility. So I figured that'd be good for my doctor's appointments because I see a lot of specialists and have a lot of doctor's appointment. So I've been doing it about a year and I actually really love it. So I'm really glad I went down this path. If any of you guys want to buy or sell a house, Hey, bit of self-promotion, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Um, and one of the things that we all know, when you're doing something that you enjoy doing, it's easier to let your body get the rest it needs, not let that depression sink in.
right,
And when I talk depression, it's not even necessarily all that mental depression, but the fatigue on your body, because when we're doing
right.
something we don't like to do, our body starts to shut down.
Well, for me, a hard thing too is that I, a big thing for me is that I tend to overdo it and I tend to push my limits too much because it's like I have a mind that's so motivated. There's so much I want to do and not just work related, but in my personal life, I want to travel the world. I do photography as a hobby. I used to go on, 3-mile walks. Doesn't mean that's not even that much, to take pictures, climb mountains, just not mountains, but hiking,
Right, sure.
Um, yeah. So I used to just do a lot of stuff that I have to be careful with now. And just about 6 months ago, I went with a couple of my friends in Cleveland to do some photography stuff. We spent the whole day, oh, maybe 6 hours walking and doing different stuff. And by the end of the day, but I knew I overdid it. And it sucks because I enjoyed myself and I felt like, oh, this is normal. I feel like a normal person. But then I have to think I'm not a normal person because I have these physical limitations. So that's the biggest thing that I still struggle with is knowing my limits and sticking to them.
Well, and I think we all have to know our limits, okay? And I think women particularly are overdoers because we feel like we have to prove ourselves to ourselves and everybody else around us. Um,
Right.
and it's funny that you brought that up because I typically blog every morning, and I haven't for the last week.
Mhm.
And I stopped blogging, and I couldn't understand why I had stopped until I sat down today to write, and I realized I needed to do some self care.
Right.
Writing every day was starting to put pressure on me. As much as I wanted to do it, it just it wasn't flowing. It wasn't what I wanted to
Right.
say. Um, and so in that blog, which I still haven't finished, it's about we need we need to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that means if you feel anything, any pain, um, any change in your body, um, you need to seek out help. But you
Right.
also have to know when that person is really helping you or when they aren't.
Right. And you have to be one of the biggest things I've learned through my experience here is you are your own advocate. No one is going to do it for you. And like I said, at the end of the day, hospitals are businesses. And while many doctors truly do care, they have a lot of patients, they have a lot on their plates. And in some doctors, work really hard, some don't. But at the end of the day, if you don't push for answers, you won't get them. If in some cases, like if I would have just after that first rheumatologist said, I need more sunlight, whatever, and all that, I could have just accepted that and just dealt with it, but I didn't because I knew in my heart that wasn't right, that there was something going on. But you have to advocate for yourself and don't take there's nothing wrong with you for an answer if you know that it's not. And with Ehlers Danlos syndrome, the average amount of time it takes to get diagnosed is 10 years. It took me
Unbelievable.
3. It took me 3. And so I'm really one of the lucky ones in comparison, but it's still terrible.
And I read that earlier today. So why does it take that long for them to diagnose that? Because 10 years, I just can't imagine the damage to the body.
Well, with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, there's a couple reasons for that. First is that um, there's 13 different subtypes, and the most common type, the kind I have, is the hypermobile one. So this one is actually abbreviated HEDS, but EDS is just like, the broader blanket term. So the hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome testing for that is only clinical. So that there's not a blood test, there's not a genetic test. That particular subtype is just clinical. And doctors don't want to look for it because they have this saying in the medical community: when you hear hoof prints, think horses, not zebras. But in this case, people with EDS, we are the zebras, and the zebra is even the actual EDS, I don't know, logo or symbol for it, because sometimes the doctors do need to think that the most simple answer isn't what's happening. And so, even though EDS, if anyone looks up Ehlers Danlos syndrome, it's going to say, "Oh, it's a rare disease. It's a rare disease," but it's believed that there are a lot more cases out there than documented, and that it's really just rarely diagnosed. Not to say it's a common disease, but it's not. It's believed that it's not as rare as it's claimed to be.
So I understand what you're going through. I don't have EDS, um, but I suffered for over 20 years with a pain in my lower right side, which most people would have said, oh, it's appendicitis.
Mhm.
But you don't have appendicitis attack and then have it go away and then come back again.
Right,
And this has been going on, like I said, for 20 years. Um, and sometimes so bad I'd be doubling over in pain.
right.
Um, my general practitioner couldn't figure out what it was. And I had already had a hysterectomy, and he said, "You know, I'm not going to tell you it's in your head, but maybe you're overdoing." And so I would try all these different things when I would feel the pain. To make a long story short, I had kidney stones a couple years ago, and I didn't recover very quickly, even from the blasting of the kidney stones, because this lower right pain came back.
Hmm.
And finally, I had a doctor who said to me, I need you to see a specialist, a GYN. And I thought, well, why? I've had a hysterectomy. This can't be that.
Right.
And it's something called pelvic inflammatory disease, and the pelvis has actually slipped back.
Oh, wow.
They say that one out of every four women has this condition. So there are women out there
Incredible.
suffering, and doctors,
Incredible.
yep, totally.
I
And
haven't even heard of that. So that's the kind of thing. How come there's not awareness out there if it's
well,
causing these issues?
that's right. And there's actually physical therapy for it. But to get into the physical therapist, we're talking about waiting 6 months to a year. So here
Wow.
you've already been suffering. Okay. And that's what made me decide that I wanted to do this series, because there is so much out there that it's not that we want to get on Zoom and complain about our ailments. Absolutely not. We want them understood.
Right.
We want the general public to be aware that if there is a pain and the first doctor can't find it, you may need to go to the next doctor. And
Right.
and I know it's expensive, and I know, some insurance companies will say, "Hey, we can't run certain tests." But if we want to have a decent life, we have to, like you said, we have to be our own advocate.
Right.
And the first doctor I went to who treated me, he was good, but he was expecting that I would take to the treatment immediately, and within 3, 4 months, I'd be okay. And when it didn't happen, um, I felt like he was rushing me. It's like,
Right.
I've lived with it for 20 years. I don't expect to be gone in 2 months. Um, but I started seeing a new doctor a month ago. And just like you feel vindicated, that's exactly how I felt. I actually broke down crying in her office, and she encouraged it. She said, "You shouldn't have had to suffer for 20 years." And the same thing with you. You shouldn't have had to suffer. You shouldn't have even had to suffer for a year. Okay. Because obviously they were finding things in
Hmm.
your blood work, in your exams, that could have led them, maybe not to this official diagnosis, but to something a little more resolvable
Right.
degree.
EDS is clinical, but if in my primary care doctor, that's not their jobs to diagnose. They send it off, but she at least did the initial testing. And from that first rheumatologist visit, that should have been alarming with for my blood work. There's this test called an ANA, which is an antibody test for autoimmune antibodies, and a regular ANA test, it goes in titers. So 1 to 40 or 1 to 80, because it doubles each time,
Okay.
is normal. 1 to 160 is even considered like a little high, but still normal. The highest that a lab can actually detect is 1 to 1280. Mine was greater than 1 to 1280. They
Um,
saw that it could be more, but they couldn't detect how many. So that is literally off the charts. So if the rheumatologist could just ignore that. And I even asked her too. I said, "Well, what about my ANA test?" She said, "Well, sometimes that could just be a false positive."
so then why not run it again?
She did, and
Oh,
she did. She did when she did her testing to just ease my mind, and it came back the same, but nothing.
interesting. So this past year during COVID, um, have you had to be even more careful than most with an
Yes.
autoimmune?
Yes, because I not only do I have autoimmune disease, because ankylosing spondylitis, that is autoimmune. Um, I also have celiac disease, which unrelated, but I've known about that for a long time. And then on top of that, I have my immunosuppressant. So I do have a suppressed immune system. I am immunocompromised. So when everything shut down March of last year, I was terrified. I thought, oh my God, if I get this, I'm going to be one of those people that gets put on a ventilator and
Mm.
dies. And at the time, still didn't know a ton about it yet. So I was very, very, very careful. I actually got COVID in October last year. And it, my 90-year-old grandfather actually got it at his doctor's office for a routine checkup. There was
Oh,
someone there had it. And so he got it. Their whole office got it. And even though, they're saying not to do large gatherings, we had just 7 people the next day, only 7 people to celebrate. It was like a memorial for what would have been my grandma's 91st birthday, because she had died just after her birthday last year. So there's 7 of us there. And the day before, my grandpa was exposed. And then the day after this memorial thing, he gets the call that he was exposed. So we all quarantine, and it was like dominoes. One by one, our tests start coming back positive. It was terrifying because I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. I didn't know what to expect, and I went from feeling normal. It was like immediate. It was immediate, and luckily I didn't have to be hospitalized. Although, and actually, my grandpa actually survived it, which I'm really proud, because
awful.
he's 90, and so most of the time in that age group, it doesn't look good. He's still going. He'll be 91 in less than a week, but it took my grandfather and I the longest to recover. And out of the 7 of us that were there that day, 6 of us got it. Somehow my uncle didn't, but the other 6 of us got it. It took me about a month, which is a long time.
Sure.
My dad and my aunt recovered in about a week. My sister and my mom about a week and a half to 2 weeks. But my grandpa and I were about a month. And it has to be because we're immunocompromised. I don't see why else. Neither
Absolutely.
one of us had to be hospitalized. So I'm lucky to that extent.
So here in Ohio, because you have an uncompromised immune system, can you get your vaccines early?
I actually, during phase one, right after, I don't remember the exact age group, but after the elderly category, they gave a list of people who were eligible, and one of them had said for genetic conditions that can affect it. So Ehlers Danlos syndrome, I found out, actually does fall under that. But what's funny enough is that part like EDS does not make me immunocompromised. The ankylosing spondylosis, that or spondylitis, that makes me immunocompromised. And so all the autoimmune stuff, that wasn't I wasn't eligible yet, but because of EDS I was. So for me, I'm sort of like, that doesn't make any sense. Hey, I'll take it, but it doesn't make any sense. I actually, though, I did not get it yet. It might have a conflict with my shots that I have to do. So my rheumatologist told me to wait a couple months while she just does a little bit of research.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm eligible when I'm ready.
Well, we wish you well on that.
Thank you.
And you know, the shot, I've had both my vaccines. The first time it was, just a sore arm. The
Mhm.
second time, my husband and I both went at the same time. He got a headache for 24 hours. I was bedridden for 36 hours. But
Wow.
when that 36-hour passed, I was up and about. So I'll take that. They also informed me that because I also have an autoimmune disorder, that that was a good thing that I was down for the count because that meant it was hitting my system. So
Good.
anybody out there listening, I've heard this from numerous doctors out there and I've done the research. So if you do get sick for 24, 36 hours, um, it means that the shot is working. So here you are now, you're taking these shots. They're helping slow down the progression.
Right.
I as I read, there is no absolute cure. Um, and you say it's genetic.
EDS is genetic. The shots, those are for ankylosing spondylitis.
Okay.
So the thing is, EDS, it can go by itself, but it typically has comorbidities with it. So a lot of the times, if you have EDS, you will have something autoimmune. And I have two autoimmune diseases. I have my ankylosing spondylitis and I have celiac disease. But EDS also typically comes with a couple other things that I have. These are a little bit more minor, but one of them, POTS syndrome, postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, where you have basically low blood pressure and fast heart rate. I was diagnosed with that actually like 5 years ago, way before everything even started. And then the other one is gastroparesis, where it literally means your stomach muscle is partially paralyzed in that you digest food a lot slower rate. I used to wake up back when I was a teenager, I'd wake up every day and just puke because I was so sick. And I actually had trouble with doctors then too. It's like, oh, are you pregnant? Are you pregnant? Because I'd throw up first thing in the morning. No, I was not pregnant. Finally, like that, and that's been under control way before this. But it was interesting to hear that the gastroparesis and POTS are so common with EDS. And so with EDS, no, there's not a cure. There's really not even there's not that much treatment even. It's a lot of it's just your lifestyle. So, every time, doctors will say, "Oh, well, exercise, exercise." With EDS, you're limited because your joints can hyperextend and dislocate. So, everyone says about any sort of physical ailment at all, do yoga, do yoga. If I do yoga, I'm going to dislocate something and it's going to be worse in the long run. My rheumatologist says, "Yeah, never do yoga." So, when you have EDS, the best exercises they recommend are walking on a level ground. You shouldn't really do hiking, which I kind of do anyway, which I shouldn't, but I like it. Um, swimming is good, and then weightlifting, only like 3 or 4 pounds at the heaviest in each arm, or your shoulders can dislocate. And so that's just a different lifestyle change. As for food, you just basically avoid oh, what is it? There's certain things that with EDS, you just have like an anti-inflammatory diet,
Sure.
basically. And then a lot of it is just really adapting your lifestyle. So how I'd said about not pushing my limits, if I just have to know I can't do certain things that normal people do, I have to uh watch for dislocations. With EDS, frequent dislocations or subluxations are very, very common because your joints are so hypermobile. So if you ever hear of someone being double jointed, it's similar to that, but on a a much worse level.
Sure. I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really just being careful. It's like human beings are so resilient. People can survive car crashes and all sorts of crazy stuff, but it's like when you have EDS, it's like carry a, wear a sign around your neck that says fragile, do not drop, you know, because everything's different. Your wounds heal slower. I've had a handful of surgeries and all of them I heal a lot slower than the average person. I could get a paper cut. Normal person, a paper cut's gone in a week. For me, it'll take a month to go away, you know? So there's just everything about your life, every decision I make, I have with it in mind. And that can be hard to adapt to also because I don't make decisions based on what I want or what I think I need. Every decision I make in the long run is really based off if I can handle it in my EDS.
So, when you moved in with your boyfriend, you didn't know that you had all this,
Right.
obviously. So, did it affect the relationship?
That actually did not affect our relationship. We we were stupid. We moved in for the wrong reasons. We actually were having some issues, which is why we moved in together because we thought it would fix it. 6 months after the fact, we'd moved out and broke up. We're actually back together now, and it's been 8 years total. So it was a rough patch, but we're good now. 8 years. He's a great guy, very very supportive. Um, the only thing that makes it hard is there's times, you know, he'll like we'll talk like some of the stuff we used to be able to do before this. And we used to ride our bikes together a lot. And he'll say sometimes, "Oh, Amy, I wish we could ride our bikes." Well, if I ride a bike more than a mile, which isn't anything on a bike,
Mm.
my hips are going to start dislocating. And it's and it's going to hurt. And it's hard because there's things I feel like it'd be different if I started off going into the relationship knowing this is
Right.
going on, but there's a lot of things that we had to change, because of that. Like there's different stuff like biking and stuff that I can't do now that I used to be able to do. And then it's also hard because I need time to rest. Like, people schedule their doctor's appointments. I actually basically block off times of the day where I need to rest. I don't see them as often as I'd like to. I really only see them once a week, which I'd like to see him more, but I'm so busy with, besides work, I have my appointments and I need time just to rest. So,
Right.
it's caused a little bit of bumps in the road, but all in all, he's very, very supportive through it all, and I couldn't ask for someone better
And,
for
and that's important for us all to understand because, and I love how you said in the beginning you got together for the wrong reasons. And I stop and think about so many people who get married for the wrong reasons.
right.
And then an illness or something like this comes about, and that's what breaks them up. Um, and as tough as that probably was when you guys broke up,
Mhm.
knew that you had to take care of you.
Right.
And now he does understand. And even though it's difficult for him,
Yeah.
difficult for you, but you can find that common ground. Um,
Right.
because, my husband and I, we've been together 37 years and it's not the same as it was day
Right.
one. And, we both make allowances for each other. And that's what I want people out there to hear that, you know, we don't have to separate ourselves from our friends because they're ill, but we do have to understand what they need. So,
I think that you just need to put yourself in each other's shoes. Like they need to understand that are not at you're not the same as you were and you probably never will be. It's they have to learn to adapt, but we, the people who are chronically ill, also have to learn that even though we're going through all this, they're going through it next to us and that it's
absolutely.
hard for them too. And even though there's times I'll think to myself and I'll think, about my boyfriend, oh, well, he just doesn't get it. He just never understands. And there are times I'll get frustrated when he does express, any frustrations he has, but I realize, it's affecting him too. It's not just affecting me. And in the long run, like I said, I couldn't ask for someone better who supports me, but it doesn't mean that he's not allowed to have his feelings and stuff because it affects him too. And
Absolutely.
it's definitely it impacts it. Um, it's it can be hard, but it, if someone decides not to stick with you because of that, then it probably wasn't going to work out anyway, you know?
Most likely, you are absolutely correct. I'm glad you said that. So before we end this, um, you you said you started out in retail. You went to college. You went into retail. Now you're in real estate. But with all this medical knowledge, have you thought about medicine?
No. Never. Um, I know a lot about medicine from my own experience. I know a lot about it, and even so, it's so funny. Like whenever my boyfriend is saying something's bothering him, oh, it's probably this, and I think to myself, okay, I can't do this. I can't diagnose him about stupid stuff. So it's something I anatomy itself is a huge interest to me. I actually do spend some of my free time doing art. I love art. I do painting, photography, all sorts of art. And I actually, since before I suffered any of this, I liked anatomy, and I would do a lot of my art based off the human heart and the human brain, sometimes lungs, but I've done a ton of human heart artwork. And ever since I started going through my medical stuff, I really incorporated anatomy even more into my artwork. So it's one of those things. It's good to know. It's good for my own personal knowledge. It's good that I can use to help friends and family. I like to use it, like I said, in my artwork. Medicine is interesting, but it's not the career path for me. I think I really found my passion with real estate, and I'll say I never would have gone into it if I wouldn't have been told, "Hey, you should stop doing retail," because I liked retail, but it's in a way, yeah, that worked out. I wish it were under different circumstances, but
Sure.
I'm happy where I'm at.
So if somebody's listening right now, and like you said earlier, wants to buy a house or has a house to sell, how can they find you?
There are multiple ways. Easiest, call or text me 330-620-1123. I also have a Facebook that I'm very active on. Facebook is Aimee Neiman. I actually have a middle name on Facebook, Amy Sean Neiman. I have a business Facebook as well. So that is www.facebook.com/Aimee. And Amy is spelled Aimee. So facebook.com/Aimee dot sells dot houses.
Oh, I love that.
Thank
Okay.
you. So
Well,
those are the best ways to find me. I'm with Keller Williams Shervenick. They're based out of Stowe, Ohio, but I do anything in Northeast Ohio. I have people I'm working with in Cleveland, people I'm working with at Akron, Canton, anything Northeast Ohio.
sounds wonderful. Well, we wish you the best of luck
Thank
on
you.
all your endeavors. And I'd love to have you back on to talk about your art and show some of it.
Yeah, that would be great.
I mean, it sounds exciting because we do one podcast with an artist out of New York. And since she's been showing her artwork in the podcast,
Mhm.
um, especially this year when she couldn't do any shows, uh,
Right.
she's been adding to her pocketbook and selling some stuff.
That's awesome.
And I would love to see what you do with the human heart and brain in your
Yeah,
artwork.
that would be good. And I also am working on a project right now you might be interested in. It's not complete, it's still in progress, but um how I'd said I'd gone through a traumatic event when I was a teenager. I had suffered a sexual assault at the hands of a boyfriend at the time who was a little bit older. And that's been incredibly hard to deal with. And I used to do a lot of writing and stuff about it, but I've done a lot of art too. And I'm actually working um, with another photographer right now who's helping me create a series that I'm calling 10 Things I'd Rather Not Say Out Loud, that sort of um, go over different thoughts in my head through the years. Um, in relation to that. Like one of them is I still remember the way your voice sounds, and you took away what should have been the best years of my life because I was a teenager. And so we're in the process of photographing different different things that represent each thought. So I have someone helping me with that. That won't be done for a few months, but
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're keeping yourself very, very busy,
it's
which
empowering, you
yep.
know.
So again, we want to wish you the best. We'll be in
Thank
touch.
you.
And again, hopefully somebody's going to contact you and want to buy or sell a house. I'd love
Hopefully, and feel free. I don't know if there's like show notes, you could always put my information on
to
there
know.
too.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank
day.
you so much. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.